education and another in counseling psychology, has spent much of her life educating and training others in environmental issues, particularly in Miami. For 25 years, she trained Everglades National Park interpretive rangers while volunteering as an interpretive ranger herself. She also worked closely with the Girl Scouts. During all those years of volunteer work, she also was a certified financial planner and served on the board of the Financial Planning Association of Miami. Having moved to Gainesville in 2019, Ellen is a member of the Gainesville Climate Reality Project, serving as presentation co-chair along with our first speaker, Susan Nugent. So when you wish to speak up, please raise your hand to the camera or within the Zoom. You will be called upon in turn. Welcome, Ellen.
Can I take? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Phyllis. That's an introduction my mom could have written. Thank you. And Julianne, thanks for recording this session. Ellen Cohen, would you wave your hand in the gallery? I've invited my friend and superior marketing consultant, Ellen Cohen in Maryland, to monitor the chat and the gallery and the participant screen for hands raised, because once I start the slideshow, I don't have access to seeing you. And I really want us today to work today on having a climate conversation. So let me give you a little introduction, and then I'll refresh and repeat what Phyllis said about how to communicate here. Listen, we no longer can deny the impacts of climate chaos. When I started doing this kind of class 7 to 8 years ago, there was some denial about things were really as bad as they have clearly become. So that's not the problem. And it's not a problem for knowing what to do about it, or the lack of workable and scalable solutions. We have the knowledge, we have solutions, we have to draw carbon dioxide out of the air, and we have to leave coal, oil, and gas in the ground. For me, the problem I want to address with us today is the outsized influence of the powerful industries on our elected leaders at every level, who cannot resist the siren call and deep pockets of industry, and the growing polarization in politics is impeding citizen collaboration and cooperation. So my vision of the solution is to encourage grassroots action, whether it be personal or political, social or civic. So to that end, over the past decade, I've created multiple programs, and they do several things. They provide basic climate science, existing solutions, and role models for action. So I want to share something one of my climate heroes, Michael Mann, put in the introduction to his new book, The New Climate War. He writes, "We are the custodians of an amazing gift. We have a Goldilocks planet with just the right atmospheric composition, just the right distance from its star, yielding just the right temperature range for life, with liquid water, oceans, and oxygen-rich air. Every person we will ever know, every animal or plant we will ever encounter is reliant on conditions remaining just this way." So I find that very inspirational, and I applaud you for attending this series. We haven't always had, cheerful information presented to us. I'm making you a promise. At the end of our hour, you will learn some facts. You will learn some social psychology. You will learn some challenges to communicating the climate crisis and learn some tools to do so, to do that communication. You will be inspired to learn more and to share what you take away from this hour with other folks. And to that end, Julianne will be providing after class both the bibliography for what went into putting this program together and a list of websites and other readings and movies that you might want to continue your own learning on your own. So I would like to invite you, if you are comfortable doing so and you are properly dressed, turn your video on so that it helps us build community. It will also help Ellen Cohen see if you're waving your arms for attention. We do ask you all to mute your mic unless you have a question. I'm going to ask Ellen to look for your raised hands, and so she can call on you. And I do want Ellen to interrupt me as we go if you have a burning question. I'd also ask you to take a minute right now. If you don't have pencil and paper or your cell phone by your side, to just go ahead and get something to write with or take a picture with. In case something strikes you while I'm talking. Also, I'll be asking you to write something down in a minute about the past classes we've had. And we will ask for a few volunteers to share in a few minutes. And the way that will work is Ellen, who doesn't know you, so you can't have your feelings hurt, will call on 2 or 3 or 4, depending on how well you're able to turbo share, which is a couple of words, a sentence, as Phyllis said, we don't need a story. So I do welcome your participation. I'm quite serious about that. We've set this up so you can participate. Now, you also can, for raising your hand, check your screen. If you're on a laptop or a desktop, there's a reaction button on the bottom of your Zoom. If you tap that, there will be a raise hand icon. If you're on an iPad, look for the top of your screen, there's 3 dots. So go ahead if you're on an iPad and find that. If you click on that, you can raise your hand. So I'd like to have like a little quiz. Would everybody please raise their hand? Okay, and Ellen, is anybody having any trouble? Yeah, good. Okay, the icons are working. Can you raise your hand on the icon? And thank you all for unmuting your videos. Terrific. Thank you so much. Okay, now the ones who put your hands up, go ahead and lower your hands. Okay, awesome. Thanks. Okay, so this is a jam-packed session. If you've got the urgent question and I can't answer it in real time, I will stay after as long as you are willing to keep listening. I'm also going to put my contact information in the chat so that if you need to reach me afterwards, you can, and it will be on the handout as well. Okay, away we go. I'm going to share my screen and dive right in. And again, I invite your participation. Great. Okay. So what I want to do is a very minute-and-a-half recap of what we've covered already in this class. In the first class, Susan Nugent, who just resigned as co-chair, so now I'm the chair of the Climate Reality Project Presentation Committee. She covered what had happened in COP26 and the IPCC, and she talked about how bad is it, what needs to happen, and what might play out. In our second session, Dr. Esther Mullins talked about what we know about climate and how we know it and why the weather is so chaotic. I'm hoping to trigger some of you to remember what stuck with you from previous class. So that's where we're heading. I'm reviewing this so that you can turbo share what stuck with you. And we will use what stuck with you throughout this program. Then Dr. Douglas Murray chimed in on water and food security, and he talked a lot about developing countries, adaptations, and how smallholding farming can thrive. And then we had Dr. Andrew Rosenberg, who is a political scientist, talking about international political impacts, cooperation, migration, conflict. And he summarized his program as who gets what, where, and how. And then last week, we had Dr. Hal Knowles. His topic was From Fear to Feedback, the Emerging Regenerative Economy. And he mentioned stewardship, sustainability, and resilience. So I want to point out this ribbon. This is a blue ribbon, and it's across the top of all of Al Gore's Climate Reality Project template slides. You are looking at the sun rising over the earth as seen from outer space. I use this slide template to remind me how slender our atmosphere is and how precious it is to me, to all of life on Earth. And this always inspires me to do more to protect and preserve this, my only home. So I've included a link in the post-class handout that Julianne is going to send to you of Amanda Gorman's video of her poem, Earthrise, which she wrote for Al Gore's 24 Hours of Reality program a year or so ago. I hope you'll listen to it. A warning. Beware, as we explore having climate conversations, that we must not play the ain't it awful game. It's a lot of fun to play ain't it awful, it's all about them. We want to focus on bringing the conversation back to our common values. In America, and we'll talk about how we know this in a few slides, those values are protection and preservation of people and places we love, and being responsible citizens for the benefit of those who follow us. Our message in our conversations must be hopeful. That's the only way to bring folks on board. So, Phyllis mentioned my bio. Why did I sell my successful financial planning practice and my beautiful lakeside home in Miami, move to Gainesville, and dedicate my life to share what I've learned about the climate crisis? Basically, I love nature, especially the ocean. I learned to scuba dive late in life, and I fell in love with the underwater world. And I want to show you Carey's Fort Reef. (1975), a beautiful coral reef, variety of staghorn and brain coral. 1985, 20 years later, 2004. 10 years later, 2014. Now, I told you no doom and gloom, but that's pretty depressing, especially for a scuba diver. But rather than weep at that destruction, it made me tap into my overarching value: protect and preserve the places I cherish most. And I am a Life Girl Scout. And one of the mottos we had was to leave a place better than we found it. So I moved into action, and I decided to do what I love to do anyway, to teach and to organize. So now I'm inviting you to reflect on something that struck you during the course of the climate program previous to this. I'll give you an example. Drew Rosenberg, the political scientist, said that international cooperation around the migration issue was not necessarily good. In fact, it could be bad. I went, what? He gave the example that the EU is cooperating with Libya to intercept and detain refugees in Libya. That stopped me in my tracks. It stuck with me. I don't know what to do with it yet, but I was struck. So please, turbo share if you're willing. Do it in a few words. Ellen, please let Ellen see you. Either raise your hand or wave. Ellen, I'm going to shut up while you figure that out.
Phyllis has a point.
What struck me about Professor Rosenberg's lecture was his statement that climate change is a crisis multiplier. I hadn't thought of that before, that it's a crisis multiplier.
Terrific.
What do you think about that?
Absolutely true. Any problem we have is made worse by a warming climate. Great. Couple more people. Okay, I'm challenging you folks. I know you're verbal. Let's go. Two more.
Jean.
I was struck by the difference between migration and adaptation. Migration is cutting the CO2 and other causes of climate change, and adaptation is what do we do to make life more livable while it is while climate change is occurring.
Thank you, Jean. I think the word you're looking for is mitigation.
Mitigation.
Yeah,
That's
and
right.
really
Mitigation versus adaptation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That is a very important distinction. And when you dive into what cities are doing, they talk about mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. Thank you, Jean. One more person.
Yes, Louise has a point.
I was struck by the comment that that almost everybody is hostile to immigrants and refugees, and I know that that's not true, but it seems to be pretty true, and I've just been struggling with that for the last couple of weeks and trying to figure out if that's a human universal or how we can work around that.
Ooh, good one, Louise. Thank you. I'd like everyone who didn't talk to write down something that struck you, because we're going to circle back that. Thank you to all of you who braved the gallery. Okay, so let's go back to my promise. I promised you will be inspired to learn more, and I promised you're going to be inspired to share what you take away from this hour with other folks, and you're going to have some ability to do that. So here's how we're going to do it. Going to give you some facts, how many Americans get it and how many will talk about it. We're going to talk about why you are better suited than the scientists or politicians to carry the conversation forward. We're going to learn some social psychology around these challenges of having this conversation, like why folks do not get it like you all do, how some challenges are political and tribal, and Louise, that may get to an answer to your conundrum. And some of the challenges are you may not feel confident or knowledgeable enough to do it. We're going to start building your toolbox of some communication skills you can use right away. Some ideas of what to say, to whom to say it, how to say it. You only need to have affinity or rapport with your audience and a little bit of science. And you all already have that because you've been in this course. And we're going to close with each of you having an idea for how to put this class into action, even if it's just a tiny bit. And for those of you already very active, how are you going to amp up your participation? We'll identify who you'll talk to, what you might say to them, using your what struck you or what stuck with you in your notes. And I'd ask you to consider if encouraging a group you belong to invite a program on Zoom, perhaps maybe not as robust as what ILR has done, but perhaps one that would move the conversation a little forward. So, fact, look at this. This is a map, and you can see the color coding. I'm looking sideways at a second monitor, so I make sure my cursor's going where I want you to see. Notice that this is the 50% line of people who in the United States do not think global warming is happening. And you will notice there are no blue shaded states, none. This is a great interactive map. I've included a link to it. You can actually go online and pick your county. And as a matter of fact, Alachua County and Miami are the two hottest counties in Florida. But when you average all of Florida, we're merely in this arena here. So it's a fact that 72% of Americans across political lines, gender, races, think global warming is happening. 72% think it's happening. Now look at this one. This is a fact. Americans were polled on dozens of issues. I pulled just a few out. This is from a study by the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication and George Mason Center for Climate Change Communication. And the data is about only 2 years old. So I'm going to shut up. I'd like you to look at that slide. And then I would like you to raise your hand, post in the chat. Ellen, please help. What do you see here? What do you see here?
Barbara, hi.
I don't know if you were calling on me, but actually this is something that we were discussing in the ILR class this morning. But I think Americans don't want to discuss global warming because it requires a sacrifice. They ultimately know that to do something for global warming, it requires a sacrifice. And also people who are against global warming also say, well, you're going to have to give up your car, you have to give up your this, you have to give up your that. But Ellen, when you made your introduction, you actually gave the key word that is sometimes ignored. You mentioned that it's going to war against climate change. When people go to war, they know they have to make a sacrifice. They know there's going to be some pain. Here they deny it and they don't want to deal with it. I'll stop here.
Barbara, that's great. I'm going to come back.
She said what I wanted to. I don't need to repeat it.
Okay, let's hear from the Barbaras. Right. Anybody else? One more, and then I have a response for Barbara's. Yeah.
Alice?
I think people
need to see things with their own eyes. And that's a problem if they don't live on the coast. And I'll give you two examples. We have a
Real
number.
quick,
Excuse me?
real quick.
Okay. Well, the example really is the number of people that have moved to Gainesville in recent years. And I'll stick with that. Okay.
I'm totally one of them, Alice. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me pick up one point from Barbara Herbstman. I think that was. It is true that people don't want to talk about it. And it is true that they don't want to talk about it because they think it means they have to give something up. But I am here to tell you, not in this program, but I have an entire program on solutions that work. And one of them actually means you don't have to decrease your lifestyle. You don't have to give up a hamburger. You don't have to give up your airplane travel. There are ways that we can live pretty much like we've been living, but our politics and policies do not support or incentivize that behavior. So one of the things that gives me hope is we know how to do it. We just have to get the right people in there to do it. Okay, thank you. So I didn't hear anybody say that there's a disconnect between people wanting us to fund renewables, people wanting us to regulate carbon dioxide, and people wanting tax rebates for electric vehicles and solar panels. So all those people, the 86%, the 75%, the 82%, how come only 35% are, only 35% are talking about it? So this is why I'm saying you can have an impact. All you have to do is move that little dial up by talking about it. Just extend the conversation. And I don't want you to take my word for it. I want to give you two very short clips from two very wonderful, beautiful, awesome climate scientists. This is Kate Marvel.
Realized over the past couple years that scientists may not be the best people to talk about climate change.
What?
Because we always think that one more equation or one more graph is going to convince people, because that's what convinces us, because we've been trained to be convinced by that. But that's not how people work. You show people a graph, their brain shuts down and they don't care, or they can't tell the difference between that graph and the other graph that they've just been shown. And so I think it's been a real learning experience for me to realize that facts are not what changes people's minds. Stories are what changes people's minds. Messengers are what changes people's minds. And all I can do is go in there and represent the facts to the best of my ability. And I think that is absolutely crucial, because we need to be telling stories that are informed by the facts. But the facts aren't going to be enough to change people's minds.
Maybe scientists have to learn how to become better storytellers?
I would be totally on board with that.
Well, you've done that, I think, here tonight, so thank you for that. And you've also got the best name of anybody who's ever been on this program.
I've given you a link to her entire interview in the resource bibliography Julianne will send out. It's delightful. And she talks about weather and clouds. It's really very interesting from a science point of view. In any case, her points are: base what you're saying on fact, but tell a story, and you are the messenger. And now for one of my most favorite climate heroines. Let's go to Katharine Hayhoe. Katharine Hayhoe is an evangelical minister who lives in Texas, who is a climate scientist. And what I love about her is she gets how bad it is. And she's living, for heaven's sake, in Texas. But she never stops smiling. So she's like, when I get a little bit down, I will watch a little clip of Katharine Hayhoe. So here she is. Again, a very short 2-minute clip from her TED Talk, which is also in the handout. Okay, so there you have it. From two climates,
hurricanes
we're the ones to do it. So we've looked at some facts. We looked at reasons why us plain folks are the right ones to talk about climate change. Now let's take a look, and it's building on what Barbara said, and I think Alice also. Why don't we talk about it? Well, one is it's not in my backyard. Even though the majority of US residents consider climate change a serious problem, generally they think of it as distant in geography and distant in time. So, because most US residents don't personally experience effects that are drastic enough, listen to this, on a regular basis to alarm them about climate change. Drastic enough on a regular basis. To counteract this, your effective climate communication is going to highlight current impacts of climate change on you and your loved ones. So that's why I started the class with a climate story of mine. Carbon dioxide dissolving into the ocean ate away my coral reef, and the extra heat bleached out the corals that weren't eaten away by acidification. So to me, the heating climate and the carbon dioxide that the ocean absorbs destroyed something I really love. So climate change affected me. It's why I care. I love Carey's Fort Reef. I love all the reefs. So I'm wondering if what you noted in terms of what struck you about immigration or mitigation adaptation, the things that you wrote down that you didn't share, the ones that you shared, can that become your climate story? And remember to frame it with local examples. So example, when we are in Jacksonville, if you refer to flooding in if we're in Gainesville and you refer to flooding in Jacksonville, where a lot of us go, that would resonate more with us than talking about Bangladesh disappearing under rising seas, although that is going to happen and millions of people will be displaced. So if we can frame climate change as a local issue, you're going to increase the sense of connection to your listener, and you may help them understand the interrelated effects of climate change. And more importantly, and this is the soapbox that I am personally on, you will help promote development of local and regional solutions that could transfer well to the national and global arenas, and further even inspire future action everywhere. So that's one problem. The other problem is it's not here now. That if it's not affecting us immediately, our brains are not wired to look that forward into the future. And we've been taught this since we're kids. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. So whatever's in front of us now is what's important. And we tend to discount the importance of future events, either good or bad. So in the climate change world, it makes future harm that's going to occur feel less important and less scary and less likely to need our urgent action today. As Catherine Hayhoe said, the science has been clear for 50 years, and the science was clear to folks at Exxon. Their scientists wrote memos saying, here's what's going to happen if we keep doing what we're doing, and got swept under the rug. Same thing with the presidents. They were advised ongoing, and every year carbon dioxide levels went up in the United States. It was like they couldn't feel the impact here. Now, for our generation, sometimes when I do these talks, I get someone raise their hand and say, yeah, doesn't matter to me, I'm going to be dead. Yeah. And I just say, yeah, probably true. I'll probably be dead too. But I'm really attached to my grandniece and nephews. And I really want them to have a shot at the kind of world I got to grow up in. So you can gently remind them it isn't all about us. It's a nice cop-out. This happens to be, it's not here now, one of the main reasons that people don't take action. So, okay, so how do you make the topic more current? Okay, let me take Gainesville. Just ask an old-time resident. I don't know actually if there are any folks if there are any folks in the gallery, Ellen, who have been in Gainesville for 25 or 30 years, could they raise their hand and would you just pick one? Because I want to ask them a question.
Phyllis, I see.
Okay, Phyllis, I'm going to ask you.
Yes, I've moved here in October of 1990.
Okay, so you've been here a long time. Would you say, Phyllis, that the summers are hotter than they were when you moved here in 1990?
Yes.
Yes, that's
Yes.
done. Thank you.
Marginally hotter, but my hottest time was 1983, June of 1983, and the rain was slow in coming, and I was in Orlando. It was
Okay.
well
Yeah.
over 100 degrees.
Wow, 1983. Okay, so what I've just done, thank you, Phyllis, thank you, Ellen. What I've just done is bring it to here and now. If you ask an old timer how something was before, they will be able to tell you that it is different. And I actually have a program called Is It Hot in Here or Is It Me? And we have some graphs that show you that it actually is hotter by magnitudes of order hotter. Okay, so that's a way to answer that it's not here now. Try and find a way to make it that way. Here's one that's really important. It's not something I already know. And we're going to see a great little clip from Frameworks in a minute about how that doesn't work. If you're talking to someone about something and they have no frame of reference, they can't get what you're saying. So you want to just be aware that if you're going to use jargon, or you've been studying this, I know some of you have been, and I think I kept telling Phyllis she should run these classes herself because she knows so much, but most of your audience may not be as educated as you are. The last one, of course, is it's polarizing, it's confusing, it's too scientific. So to avoid polarization and confusion, the thing you want to do is use language that points the listener towards the values we all share: protection, preservation, responsible management. So for example, if you're going to talk about ocean acidification, I'm not going to talk about ocean acidification. I'm going to talk about how oceans support humans and human well-being in terms of food and recreation and climate moderation. I'm not going to talk about ocean acidification, which actually is probably too scientific. Or I'll talk about, Americans are really good problem solvers. We are. We've done moonshot thinking, and we take our civic responsibility seriously. And so that'll steer us the conversation away from another value of collaboration to one that actually fights with that, because Americans are also ruggedly individualistic, and we're seeing that in Canada. We're seeing that everywhere. So you want to be aware where you're pointing your listeners as you're talking to them. Okay, so really good social psychology book for those of you who want to read some more about it. I'm just going to go boom, boom, boom. George Marshall is British, and his thesis is our brains are not wired to talk about climate change. And so he's explaining what happens. We deliberately ignore facts, even when we know the facts contradict our belief. Climate victims are less certain that climate change is real after the fire, the hurricane, the flood than they were before. How in God's name does that make sense? Scientists have been vilified, and I think we kind of went through a phase where we listened to them, and now with COVID, they're being vilified again. And I haven't watched this movie yet, but it's on my to-do list. Why do people worry more about asteroids and UFOs than they do about climate change? So he addresses those social psychological facts about our brain. Another way to look at this is
Elle, I think
Yeah.
there is a question that
Oh,
Phyllis
awesome.
has.
Awesome. Go ahead. Thank you, Elle.
I just wanted to say that the film Don't Look Up is a parable for climate change. And it's based on the concept of a hyper object, which is so significant that we can't get it into our brains, and we feel helpless before it. So we want to ignore it. And that's the point, as I understand it, of that movie.
Thank you. And that fits right in with the challenges to communicating climate change. In fact, one of the ideas that I would throw out at the end of the program is, why doesn't ILR have a climate book club or a climate movie club? And just because there's a lot of great movies out there to take a look at this. In any case, I'd like to move on to some other, I don't want to say academic, but it is kind of academic. There's a delicious video by a meteorologist. His name's J. Marshall Shepard. He'll be on the resource list with a link. And he talks about the unconscious biases that lead to the situations that we examined in the last slide. And so we have confirmation bias, which says we find evidence to support what we already believe. So we disregard what doesn't match. Like a person arguing that we have global warming because Texas had a deep freeze. That's not understanding that it's because of climate change that Texas froze. while the rest of the world got hot. So it also, just to make a kind of something you may want to work with in your conversations with people that I did not hear come up, maybe in Esther's talk, to distinguish between climate and weather. Climate is like your personality. It's like long-term and embedded. And weather is like your mood. Climate is like your winter clothes and your summer clothes. And weather is like, today I'm going to wear a peach-colored shirt. So that's something that people don't quite get. There's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. That's this: we really think we know more than we really do. And here's a cute little exercise. So again, Ellen, if you would just monitor this is not to ask you to talk, it's ask you to raise your hands. How many of you think you are above average intelligence? Everybody raise your hand if you think you're above average intelligence. So Ellen, do we have most of the hands in the gallery raised?
I'm going to say 50%.
Really?
Yeah, let's get those hands up.
When you
All right.
When you ask most groups, honestly, about 85% of the people raise their hands that they are above average intelligence, which is, of course, almost ridiculous, because if you're average, you're 50%. So, okay, you didn't play. That's fine. That's your Dunning-Kruger effect. We think we know more than we do, or we underestimate what we don't know. It's sort of an illusory superiority complex, and we just all have it. And cognitive dissonance, here's the example Marshall uses. Groundhog Day. He's a weatherman, right, on TV. He often has very intelligent people asking him if the rodent's forecast is accurate. They're dead serious. Okay. So, okay, we started with the quote from Michael Mann that we're custodians of this amazing gift, and every person we will ever know, every animal or plant we'll ever encounter, is reliant on conditions remaining this way. He goes on in his introduction to say, to continue to knowingly alter those conditions in a manner that threatens humanity and other life forms, simply so a few very large corporations can continue to make record profits, is not just unacceptable or unethical. It would be the most immoral act in the history of human civilization. Not just a crime against humanity, but a crime against our planet. We cannot be passive bystanders as polluters work toward making that eventuality come to pass. He says, my intent with this book is to do everything within my power to make sure we aren't. Slow breath. He points out how we're being manipulated and how the current manipulation is taking the playbook straight from the big tobacco, smoking will not harm you playbook. So, disinformation, deflection. Deflection, do you remember the crying Indian commercial from our growing up years? Yeah, a couple of people nod their head. It's an Indian in a canoe, and there's all kinds of plastic and paper pollution. And he's crying at the end saying, you know, we can keep America beautiful. That ad was paid for by Coca-Cola, the bottling company, because they wanted to deflect responsibility for plastic pollution from them, because it would cost them more money to retrieve bottles and recycle them than it did to have us throw them away. So they deflected responsibility from the corporation onto us. Very powerful. False solutions. I know we didn't get into geoengineering in this course. I also have a little program on that, courtesy of Stephen Mulkey at University of Florida. Those are false solutions. These are building big machines or digging really big holes in the earth in which to suck carbon dioxide out of the air or bury carbon dioxide produced by burning fossil fuels into the ground. All of those solutions are not scalable. All of those would require enormous amounts of burning coal, oil, and gas to produce them. They are a false solution. Oh, one of the false solutions is spraying sulfur crystals into the atmosphere to mimic a volcanic ash. There's a lot to say about that. It's a false solution. Okay, downplaying the urgency. This is where they say, you know, we've got lots and lots of time to solve this, and we can kick that can down the road, which is exactly what our governments have been doing. And sadly, some of our government some people in our governments, local and national and global, are doing that still. And you heard Susan's program, the very first class, talk about the disappointment of COP26. Okay. The final weapon in the arsenal is doom. It's the I'll be dead, or, and I'm guilty of it too. I went to Africa before it got ruined, right? I wanted to see the animals in their natural habitat before Africa was overrun with tourists. It's kind of, get mine while I can and the hell with the future. And that's kind of it's kind of powerful. And it's also makes it easy to just, display ain't it awful, which I refuse to do. So real quick, I wanted to show you who these people are. And you might recognize some legislators, James Inhofe. You might recognize some government leaders, Rex Tillerson, some businessmen, like Charles Koch, and some scientists for hire, Bjorn Lomborg. And a lot of my friends who are kind of my clipping service will send me articles that they read. And Bjorn Lomborg gets more press than he should get. He is not a climate scientist, but he is a scientist for hire. So, there's some power people behind us on that. Okay, take a breath. All right, where have we been? We looked at some facts about how Americans feel and what Americans talk about. We looked at some challenges, and let's learn some strategies for talking about it, assuming you take the gauntlet I'm throwing down to this class to say, let's extend the conversation. This may be where you want to take some notes. So here's what we're going to look at. 3 things. We're going to look at how you reframe a description of carbon dioxide that makes all the difference in understanding for lay people of what the problem is. We're going to see a cute video on how to reach a common goal. In this case, a video put on by Citizens Climate Lobby about how to put a price on carbon. And we will look at my favorite, a dancing leadership guy, and how you can use him as a role model. Please bear in mind that we're always bringing our discussion back to common values: protect and preserve the people and places we love, and being responsible citizens. Our message must be hopeful. It's the only way to bring people on board. So Frameworks is a social science institute. They field test informational paragraphs to see if it helps lay public understand scientific concepts around global warming. The film goes way too quickly for you to see the script they use. I'm going to read you a very abbreviated version so that you're not like, oh my God, I couldn't read it. You can't read it. It goes by too fast. And I am also putting the entire script in your bibliography at the end. What they communicate, and you'll see to men on the street, is regular carbon dioxide is used and created by normal life processes, but rampant levels of carbon dioxide come from burning fossil fuels for energy. We need to reduce rampant carbon dioxide. It's getting out of control. So just listen for how vocabulary and a metaphor communicate how carbon dioxide works in the natural world and in the rampant world of burning oil, coal, and gas. So.
As part of a larger, more comprehensive investigation to find out how the public thinks about carbon dioxide and its role in climate change, Frameworks researchers conducted rapid interviews with ordinary Americans in locations across the country. So let's take a look at what this looks like in some excerpts from our on-the-street interviews, a rapid response research technique that Frameworks uses to confirm and visualize the findings of more in-depth research on public thinking.
What role do you think that carbon dioxide or CO2, what role does that play in the climate?
Very bad one.
Oh gosh, this is awful. I should know all this stuff.
Give me a definition if you don't mind.
That's what you exhale, right? Trees absorb it.
Think of trees like processing carbon dioxide usually.
Isn't that like the car exhaust?
The fumes out of a car.
Car exhaust.
If you leave a car on in a garage, the carbon dioxide will go inside that car.
I don't know. I think trees absorb it, we exhale it. It's not good for us to inhale, but it's good for plant life.
So what do you think happens if there's too much carbon dioxide on the planet?
That means everybody's gonna die. We gonna all suffocate.
The impact, if there was a massively, like too much, it could impact our health in general. I don't know if too much of it could also negatively impact plant life.
I don't know, probably like greenhouse gases or something like that.
Something about the ozone, I think.
Well, it affects the ozone layer greatly.
Everybody's saying the greenhouse effect, global warming.
It like puts a hole in the ozone.
It's breaking down the ozone. I think it's the one that's doing that. I'm not sure.
I think it disrupts the ozone layer.
People were unable to easily reconcile carbon dioxide's role in respiration and photosynthesis with its role in climate change. To explain the harmful role of anthropogenic CO2, Frameworks developed and tested the taxonomy of regular versus rampant carbon dioxide. This helps distinguish between the CO2 that is necessary and CO2 buildup that is problematic. Researchers read this passage aloud and then asked participants follow-up questions about carbon dioxide, as well as some of the broader causes and consequences of climate change. Let's listen to how this way of framing information about the effects of CO2 worked to help participants distinguish between beneficial and harmful levels of carbon dioxide.
Yeah, from what I'm getting, regular is just the standard. If there was no influx of carbon dioxide, regular is just the equilibrium. It's I breathe out, plant breathes in on a cycle. And then the rampant is if, two people breathe out and there's only one plant, the plant only needs the one breath, in a very, very simple analogy.
We're producing more carbon dioxide than a normal life cycle or environment would naturally, just as humans produce it and the environment consumes it, plants consume it, and it's just building up. Carbon dioxide's a part of life. We need some of it, but we currently have way too much in the environment.
We have to find a way of lessening this rampant carbon dioxide that we're putting out.
Oh, you want to get rid of the rampant if you can, as much as possible.
More carpooling, more buses, more public transit, more bikes, just things that we can control in our everyday lives, things that are very simple that we just don't do.
Find alternative fuels, lessen the emissions of the carbon dioxide that we're putting into the air.
There are things we need to start sacrificing and changes we need to make, or else it's just going to keep getting out of control. The rampant carbon dioxide is just the excess carbon dioxide that we're producing that human beings weren't always producing, so it's not natural.
That there's more of it than is necessary for just normal life, not just human life, but plant life, life in general.
Naturally in the world, there is carbon dioxide, and there needs to be a certain level just to keep every process, photosynthesis and everything else we need. We are going to exhale carbon dioxide, that's going to happen. But now that there's too much of it, it's throwing the balance of everything off in the environment.
This taxonomy offers a way of organizing pieces of knowledge which otherwise might seem to conflict. Also, use of alliteration reinforces the idea that these two concepts are a contrasting pair, which helps distinguish between what is common knowledge about carbon dioxide and its role in trapping heat in the planet's atmosphere. This latter information enables thinking about impacts and consequences, including connections to other phenomena like ocean acidification. This framing tool's ability to establish a sound causal understanding and to head off dominant misconceptions likely to arise otherwise about carbon dioxide was qualitatively and quantitatively tested with nearly 3,000 Americans.
So, can you tell what worked? Could you, maybe a couple of people, throw one or two ideas of what they picked up from this? What worked in shifting people's understanding? And Elle, could you call in maybe just two people?
No bees. Barbara, Willig, did you have something?
Well, it seems to me as though not enough information is coming out as to what things actually are. Because when you heard those people, it was very vague. And I don't think we're doing enough in print in telling people exactly what is happening, what carbon dioxide does, why we need to eliminate it, and make it simple. I know for me, the whole topic is beyond what I know about.
Ah, there you go. It's one of the challenges. You don't have anything to hook it to. Thank you, Barbara. Yes, we can make it simple. That's what we can do. Anybody else? One other person. What did you take away?
Bob Bernstein.
It seemed that understanding processes was much more important than understanding a few facts, like, CO2 is now at 420 parts per million.
Yes, yes. Okay, both of you, you got it. So I hope you all took that in. It is simple. And the metaphor that they would use if we continued with this conversation and this training program would be burning coal, oil, and gas releases pollution into our atmosphere, and that pollution acts like a heat-trapping blanket, making Earth warmer and warmer. That's it. You don't need to know we're at 420 parts. I mean, when I teach, I do teach where we're at and where we should be, but that doesn't communicate what Barbara and Bob addressed. Thank you both very much. Okay. Oh, no, we just saw you. Okay, go ahead. Okay, this is 3 minutes long, delightful.
Welcome to the far middle, that delightful headspace between the far left
Namaste.
and the far right.
Howdy.
We like ideas from both sides of the aisle here and realize that when we hurt the other side, we're really just hurting ourselves.
But when we hurt ourselves, we're also hurting the other side.
Ow! It's only when we stop trying to hurt each other that we can solve big issues, like climate change. Right, guys?
I mean, I don't know about that.
I wouldn't say that at all. Say something else completely.
Here in the far middle, we support a climate change solution called the Energy Innovation Act. It's a national policy that addresses climate change without growing the size of government or destroying our modern economy. Let me explain.
Nice one.
That was clearly your fault.
Okay, here we
It
go.
was on your side.
My side's
Your
doing just
side
fine
did it.
over here.
Let me explain. Fossil fuels are taxed at the source for every ton of CO2 they put into the air. Energy companies can still do business. They just have to pay a fee if they pollute the air because, well, we all breathe it. The collected money is split up and distributed to every American taxpayer, not the government.
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah, that actually makes sense.
So we all agree then?
No.
The money comes as a monthly check you can use to compensate for higher energy prices or use to invest in clean energy, which doesn't get carbon taxed. With clean energy on an equal playing field, the American free market gets kicked into an innovation frenzy to see who can create the cheapest, cleanest energy to get your business first. We literally can't even imagine what cool tech will pop up because it hasn't been invented yet.
Cool.
And some pretty big hitters support the idea of putting a price on carbon. 27 Nobel Prize-winning economists, literally all living ex-Federal Reserve chairs, and over 3,500 other economists from across the country.
Even oil companies like it.
And like a gazillion nonprofits. This is great.
I agree.
Aw, bring it in, guys. The thing is, we need your help letting Congress know climate change isn't a far left or a far right issue. Visit farmiddle.com to let Congress know that the far middle is alive and well, and that we want them to start working together, shoulder to shoulder, on climate. Go on, save the world. I'll take care of them.
And indeed, supporting the energy innovation and carbon dividend legislation in Congress is a good way to price carbon. It's one of the solutions we can do. So what they did here is they identified some common values. They were able to tell a story with the little graphics with, that you get money. They used visual imagery. There was some information about how this would work. He got the two sides that don't listen to each other to listen, so that you can do that. You can do this too. And here is for the brave ones of you who have been willing to raise your hands and put yourself out there in today's class. Good for you. You are this dancing leadership guy.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. he publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. See, it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
So this is one role model for you as you go forth in the world. Remember, you don't have to be the leader. If you were number 2 or number 3 or number 4, that would be really great. So to do that. Okay, so we are at a little past 2:30. I do have probably another 10 minutes of some videos of real people and some conversation. So I invite anyone who does need to sign off. No harm, no foul. But if you can stay, I will go ahead and keep going. Got a video of one of our lay leaders in Gainesville, Jay Rosenbeck, who left a career in healthcare of all things to take over the League of Women Voters Natural Resources Committee. And yes, League of Women Voters is very, very welcoming of men, and he does a phenomenal, phenomenal job. I've attached a 15-minute video of how did he make that change, his story. So that'll be also in your handout.
So I guess if there's one individual action that I identify as a big idea, even though it's simply stated, it is that our vote may be the best individual action we can take. If we vote for men and women who share our values, who value specifically preserving a habitable planet, that's an individual action that may have huge, generalizable impact.
Thank you. So Catherine Hayhoe says, talk about it. Jay Rosenbeck says, vote about it. The Dancing Leadership Guy says, follow somebody else and help create the crowd. And now I'd actually like to introduce you to somebody who's actually a participant in this class. And I'll let her speak for herself.
My name is Jean Bell, and I'm an old friend of Ellen Siegel's. I live in Colorado, but using the miracle of Zoom, I took Ellen's Climate Conversations 101 class last fall. I learned a lot. I enjoyed the class. I'm not an expert, just an ordinary person interested in learning and doing what I can to help save the planet from global warming. One of the things I learned in Ellen's class came from a video you'll see later in your class. Catherine Hayhoe is a climate scientist in Lubbock, Texas. What do you think she says is the single best way you can do to decrease carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? Buy an electric car, install solar panels, lobby your congressman. All good. But the very best thing to do, she says, is to talk with people. And in her 15-minute TED Talk, she explains how to talk with people, even climate change deniers. The basic idea is to understand what's important to them and then connect the dots with why the values they already hold may be at risk if we don't get climate change under control. I took Catherine Hayhoe's advice to heart and began talking individually with friends and family. Then in January, I decided to see if I could talk with a larger group of friends on Zoom. I borrowed some of Ellen's slides and put together a half-hour presentation of the top 10 things that impressed me in her class. Things like the dramatic sea level rise and how it could put much of Miami Beach underwater in my lifetime. I didn't want to concentrate too much on the problems. I think we're all too aware here in Colorado after the wildfires last summer. I tried to balance the problems with things that give me hope, such as whale poop, a topic in Ellen's class that totally surprised me and touched me because it's such a dramatic indicator of the interconnection between all living things on Earth. Who would have thunk whale poop would have anything to do with climate change? Anyway, I put together this small talk, invited people I knew to a Sunday afternoon Zoom call. About 25 people came. It was really quite fun. My presentation was well received, and the resulting discussion was equally interesting as people shared what they knew and how they want to address climate change. I'm especially pleased that my little talk encouraged friends to begin talking with others they know. 2 people have decided to take Al Gore's climate leadership training in April. One person surprised me by writing her congressman the very next day after my talk. She's inspired to start a local chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby here in my hometown. I'm not going to dedicate my life to addressing climate change. My life was already pretty full before I took Ellen's class. But I can do my little bit by continuing to talk with people. I hope that you will also find ways to spread the word. Thanks for letting me share a little bit of my story.
Thank you, Jeannie. So I'm hoping some of you will do that as well. So let's just wrap up. Deja vu, what did I promise you? I promised you some facts, promised you conversation about why you. We looked at some challenges to communication. We looked at a handful of tools to build your toolbox. And we saw 2 retired folks who took on action that fit their skills and their interests. And I kind of wanted to call out Phyllis again, because Phyllis, I think, is an amazing and inspirational leader. I think she's going to be on stage, but maybe not on this topic. So on to action. Think about what you wrote down at the beginning of this program, or as you were listening, what struck you, stuck with you, or impressed you. Would you please type into the chat who you will talk to? I don't need their name. I'll talk to my husband, my sister, my daughter, my dentist. Who will you talk to? What might you say to them? Like, what are you going to share? When are you going to do it? Write this down on your paper too, and emphasize the values we share about protection of people and places we hold dear. I want you to go out in the world and be the trusted messenger to your family, your friends, your civic and social groups, your faith groups, your book clubs, and My last slide says it all. Kudos to you for all you are, for all you will be. The world is counting on you. And here are just some ideas that I'm throwing out to you if you wanted to extend your own influence more strongly. Learn to do these kinds of presentations or invite us at Climate Reality Project to present to other people. We do have a 6-session series of climate science education, as I mentioned before. You could email me. I guess I should put myself back in the chat. As soon as I stop screen sharing, I will. For being on a mailing list that I created for occasional updates or information or other programs on Zoom. I also could use some folks who like researching. I'd like to research more in-depth programs on geoengineering and on drawdown. I mentioned before, we could use a climate book club or climate movie club. All of this can be done on Zoom. There's also some awesome climate modeling software for lay people, like En-ROADS or Climate Central interactive maps and charts. I would love to have somebody who likes doing that kind of thing take that on as a project and help develop a program. And I'm always looking for someone as co-host, as my friend Ellen is willing to do, to help out on the technical part, or if you'd like to also learn to do this kind of presentation, that would be great. So do contact me if you would like. Let me stop share. Elle, I think you're trying to get me to pay some attention to the chat. Yeah, go ahead.
Just
Elle.
some good discussion in there.
Yeah, okay. Do I need to respond to any of it right now?
No.
Oh, okay. Phyllis, I see your hand. I'm back in the gallery.
Yes, I wanted to say that several years ago, I attended a meeting here. It was a presentation by people from other universities about how to communicate. And one of the issues that struck me was the use of the word believe. Do you believe in climate change? And belief is about things that you cannot observe, that are not observable facts. And rather, it's important, and I pointed this out at the meeting, to say, I think, or I know.
That's great. And when you watch Marshall Shepard's video, he talks about you can't believe in climate change, just like you can't believe in gravity. It just is. It's a really strong point. Good.
Years ago, I was in a crafts group and we just chatted as we worked, and I said something about climate change. And one of the women said, "Oh, do you believe in that?" And I said, "It's not a matter of believing. It's a matter of familiarizing yourself with the science and the information that it provides us."
Exactly right. Exactly right. Exactly
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Are we finished?
I have nothing more to say. I'm open for questions. I thought I might like to see if I can get into the chat and see if there's anything I would like to comment on. I'm working on doing that. Wow, there's a lot of comments. Thank you all. Whoa. We see major denial, supportive of action, argument. John Paul asks, have I reviewed EPRI white paper strategies? John Paul, if you're still here, I don't know what that is. Yeah, talk to me.
EPRI is the Electric Power Industry or Institute, which is a nonprofit that looks at all the technologies, available to us, to move to a cleaner environment. In fact, this is a pretty strategies and actions for achieving 50% reduction in the total US greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And it's very detailed, it goes through practically about everything, mostly about EVs, but all the things that affect the grid, as well as how these things overlap with one another. Very well written, detailed.
Great.
You might be interested in it.
I am. I just took a picture of what you said. That'd be great. Okay, Anne Marie is agreeing with Phyllis. Bob Bernstein, you're absolutely right. Societal problems today are more difficult than the technological ones. Phyllis agrees. Yeah. Okay, Tammy makes a good point. A false solution is the electric car today when we're using fossil fuels to power the electricity in our home. Yes, that it's actually, yeah. I would refer you all to something. I mean, I have so many resources, but you might write this down. Rewiring America with Saul Griffiths. And just Google that, Rewiring America, Saul Griffiths. He has a video on Vox, VOX, and he has a fabulous how we can do it. And the answer is keep fossil fuels in the ground. And he talks about how we can do it and what it would take and how we could do it. It's even less ambitious than moonshot. It's really, I get very excited about that. Emerging technologies, you know, something will come with the batteries and that kind of thing. Okay, John Paul, you again. Yeah, Department of Energy is funding small scale carbon. Yeah, I understand carbon capture as part of current gas power plants to assure stability of the grid. That's true. But the humongous ones where you plant 10,000 of them around the earth to suck CO2 out of the air is just plain stupid. Carbon dioxide is 0.04% of our atmosphere. Oxygen's 21%, that's what we breathe, and nitrogen is about 70%, and the rest is miscellaneous gases. It is a false solution. It will cost too much to build. It's not been scalable. And we have other natural climate solutions available that would not do that. Okay, Anne Marie, you're right. Electric car is one piece of it. Part of it is Al Gore closes his program with vote with your wallet. In other words, be careful what you're buying. And like, I no longer will buy blueberries that are not grown in the US because I don't want food that comes from an airplane. It's a little move that I'm making in my own personal life. And I'm hoping that if lots of people did that, then we would stop growing blueberries and flying them in from Chile. You know, but that doesn't move the needle a lot, but it makes me feel like I'm doing something. And the electric car is somewhat the same thing. Okay, right, Anne Marie Rizzo. Where are you, Anne Marie? Are you still here? Oh yeah, really terrific comments. Have we mentioned the current Senate Bill 1024 on rooftop solar? If you read the Gainesville Sun, I was in there on a letter to the editor, encouraging people to write to our state legislators to say, this is crazy. I have solar on my roof, and economically it made a lot of sense because I got a tax credit, and I got to, if I make more power than I use, I get paid for generating it, and it gets input in the grid. And all of the power companies are saying that it hurts them because we're using their grid but not paying for it. But the truth is less than 3% of Florida roofs have solar on them. And they have other ways of charging us for using the grid. So it is a specious argument, and it is being propelled, as Anne Marie has said, by Florida Power and Light, NextEra, and lobbyists. And now's the time.
I'm sorry, but that's incorrect.
Which part is incorrect, John? Correct me.
What do you call it? But their argument is one customer's class of customer is subsidizing another, and that is absolutely true.
I pay a fee for being connected to the grid.
That fee is a fee to be connected to the grid, not to use the grid to send yours to everybody else.
Okay, thank you for the correction. Okay, oh, okay, got it. And Phyllis, you also made that correction. Thank you. Okay, good. Okay, well, all right, Anne Marie, I'd love for you to reach out to me, and John Paul, I'd love for you to reach out to me too with how I could reach you personally for a little more conversation.
Absolutely. I've already written that down. I've got your email, and I would like to participate in the 6 sessions.
Great. Okay. Okay. Other questions, other comments? Great participation in the chat. Want to thank Ellen for skipping the program and, and being the monitor. Yeah. Julianne? Oh, I see. That's thank you very much, Julianne. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ellen Siegel and Ellen Cohen, for your participation and an excellent presentation. Thank you. We'll stay in touch.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.